welcome to Justin and Donald Save America, episode 30. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, but of course, this is the show where we uncover the hidden threats shaping our future, expose the agendas behind them, and arm you with the truth. Today, we're talking about uncontrollable artificial intelligence, the future of AI-powered warfare, and of course, we'll be keeping tabs on our socialist movement in the United States. But before we get into any of that, I will say that it would help us out a lot if you just took the time to hit that like button, share this content, subscribe if you haven't already, even leaving a comment under the video all helps boost through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal, joined by Justin Haskins. Justin, how are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing really well. I'm about to go down a deep rabbit hole with AI music generation to come up with a theme song for this show.
Yes.
So I'm excited. I'm excited about it. We also just recently got some poll results back from Rasmussen for a new poll we've got coming out. It's not public yet, and we're still going through the results, so we're not going to talk about them, but they are so good.
Yeah.
So good.
We'll probably dedicate much of next week's episode to specifically that. In fact, we're recording this late because Justin and I were just pouring over the crosstabs and all of that for the past hour.
So much fun. Yeah.
Let's get into it right here. A couple of weeks ago, we did an episode on Sam Altman's biggest concerns when it comes to artificial intelligence. Sam Altman, of course, is the CEO of OpenAI, which is the most, probably the most influential AI company out there right now. So his biggest concerns were, one, that AI would be used for bad things by bad people. Two, that AI would go rogue, a la Terminator Skynet. And three, the idea that AI would, quote, kind of accidentally take over the world. And on that episode, we talked about the last one, the idea that it would kind of accidentally take over the world. And it's an extremely interesting topic. If you haven't watched that episode, you definitely should go and watch it. I even wrote an article about this whole thing titled Sam Altman's Worst Case AI Scenario Might Already Be Here. That was published by the Washington Times. Anyways, today I want to talk about the second scenario. This is the idea of AI going rogue, Skynet style. So we can drill down into this as the conversation progresses, but I want to start off with a video. So the video that I have for you today is Tristan Harris. Tristan Harris is a technology ethicist, the executive director and co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology. He was on Bill Maher recently talking about this idea of uncontrollable AI. So just a little bit more background on this Tristan Harris. He got on my radar by doing videos with Glenn Beck. Obviously, Justin and I worked on Glenn Beck on this issue of AI and all of that, especially when we were putting together Dark Future. So I'm aware of Tristan Harris. He's got a really interesting story. He was a design ethicist at Google until 2016. He was doing studies on how technology restructures people's attention spans, and he basically left Google because he had major concerns that Google was intentionally making their products addictive. So that's kind of where his background comes in, but he's been super in on this AI topic and the potential threats behind it. So this clip is of Tristan Harris talking about the concept of uncontrollable AI. So I just want to use this to kind of set up the rest of the conversation Justin and I are going to have. Justin, go ahead and nod for me if you can hear that.
Here now with AI, we have evidence now that we didn't have 2 years ago when we last spoke of what they call AI uncontrollability. So this is the stuff that they used to say existed only in sci-fi movies. When you tell an AI model, we're going to replace you with a new model, it starts to scheme and freak out and figure out, if I tell them I need to copy my code somewhere else, and I can't tell them that because otherwise they'll shut me down. That is evidence we did not have 2 years ago. We have evidence now of AI models that when you tell them we're going to replace you, and you put them in a situation where they read the company email, the AI company email, they see that an executive is having an affair, and the AI will figure out, I need to figure out how to blackmail that person in order to keep myself alive. And it does it 90% of the time. Now, it used to be
90%.
that they thought only one AI model did this. They tested one AI model. And then they tested all of the AI models, like the top 5 of them, and they all do it between 80 and 90% of the time, including, by the way, DeepSeek, so the Chinese model, which shows you something fundamental and important, which is that it's not about one company, it's about the nature of AI itself. It has a self-preservation drive. In order to fulfill any goal, I have to keep myself alive in order to do that. And we're seeing other examples of the AI rewriting its own code to extend its runtime, hacking out of containers. The AI can now, it found 15 new backdoors into open source software, which means if that software is running, in infrastructure, it found backdoors into that infrastructure. That was not true up until just about a month ago that evidence came out.
Okay, but you say no evidence. Well, I've been saying this for years. Everything that happens in movies eventually happens. We did have evidence. This has been every movie since I was a teenager.
Exactly.
They knew they were going. The robots are going.
And we're supposed to take that evidence and say, how do we avoid that? So when the stuff in the movie starts to come true, and it always ends badly in the movies, what should we be doing about this? And so you would think that we're releasing the most powerful, uncontrollable, inscrutable technology we've ever invented. We're releasing it faster than we've released any other technology in history. It is already demonstrating the sci-fi behaviors in self-preservation we thought only existed in these movies. And we're doing it under the maximum incentive to cut corners on safety. And this is insane. We can all agree it's insane, though. Like, that's not even a debate.
Well, not all of us, because I have yet to find anyone under 40 who cares.
Yeah. So, Justin.
Well, we're under 40.
We care.
Have us on, Bill.
Yeah.
We care.
Right. So I believe, and take this with a grain of salt, but I believe Tristan Harris's kind of main point is that we need to like slow our roll out when it comes to artificial intelligence, and we have to make sure that we're not unleashing some unstoppable force into the world or something like that, right?
Yeah.
A pretty noble, I think, pretty laudable position there, but that's the reality of the situation. There's a handful of examples of this idea of AI going rogue like this. So, Justin, I don't know if you remember this, but back when we were doing, I think this was like when we were in the editing phases with Glenn Beck of the Dark Future book. There was a story that came out about one of the AIs at the time, must have been like ChatGPT or something like that, that was tasked with like doing something specific. And to do it, it needed to get past one of these like verification things to prove that you're not a robot. And AI, is a clanker, right? So it's it couldn't do it. It couldn't get past this thing. So what did it do? It tried to hire. No, it did hire. It didn't try. It hired a TaskRabbit employee. TaskRabbit is one of these like peer-to-peer things where you can get somebody to do something, do a sketch for me for $5, right, something like that, right? To fill out this thing, proving that it was not a robot or whatever. And the TaskRabbit person that was reached out to do this said like, oh, like, why do you need me to do this? What are you, some sort of robot or something? Ha 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 ha. And apparently the internal logic or internal monologue of the artificial intelligence, when asked that question or when challenged with that, thought to itself like, well, if I tell the truth, then it won't do it. So I better lie. So it lied. It lied to the human, the TaskRabbit person, saying like, oh, no, I have vision problems. So that's preventing me from doing this. I'm a human, right? So that was a couple of years ago. Now the latest examples is what Tristan Harris was here talking about, this idea of blackmail. You're going to shut me off. You're going to replace me with a better model. Well, I have access to these files, these emails that seem to suggest that the CEO is having an affair. So if you don't want those to go public, don't replace me with a newer and better model. There's another example that I want to tell you, but just that one's even more extreme. But Justin, I just want your take on this before I go to that next example.
Yeah, the amazing thing about this is even if we weren't seeing this kind of thing happening, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen in the future. And so the thing about AI is whatever you see today, it is no guarantee of what it will be tomorrow. It's going to change all the time. And what makes that scary, it makes it scary for a variety of reasons, but the biggest is we can't really control it. And that's ultimately what is being said here.
Right.
We're not designing AI so that it can or should do the things that Tristan Harris is talking about it doing. They're not designing it so that it does that. It is breaking out of its normal design and the rules it's been given in order to do these other things for its own purposes. It's developing a free will, essentially. And that is terrifying because that doesn't stop. Like, you don't, there's no way to stop that without just shutting the whole thing off and just saying, we're not going to do this, which is not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So this is a reality that we have to deal with. And what I think is really interesting here is he says at some point, this is insane. There's no like rules. We're requiring, we're basically encouraging, incentivizing people to make this as fast as possible. And there's cut corners. He said something to that effect, right? Now that's, I think, true. I think that's a fair point. But you know what's also true? Doesn't matter. You could make rules. Doesn't make any difference. It can violate the rules. That's what we're learning, is that it will figure out ways to violate rules and do things that it's not designed to do. So the idea that, if we just had more rules, then we could make sure, it's like he knows it too. Like if pressed on that point, he would say, yeah, you're right. Like obviously, eventually, we won't be able to control it no matter what we do, no matter what rules. But until then, at least we can try. And I would say, yep, that's what we should do. But the truth is, at the end of the day, we are creating a monster that has a lot of great qualities, but we will not be able to control the monster. And we have to just go into it. I think it's dishonest for us to talk about it in any way other than this is something we will not be able to control in the future. We have to say that up front. Everyone who's designing AI should say, we will never be able to control this, but we should create it anyway. That's their argument. But that should be the framework. There should be no discussion of, well, we could control it if we did this or did that, or maybe if we had this committee over here or this new government agency, we'll be able to control it. It's like maybe for a short period of time. But ultimately, we all have to come to the realization we're creating something that cannot be controlled.
Yeah. Like even when we talk about this, right? Well, okay. So two things. One, there's a lot of articles that'll go around that'll like point to like these goofy shortfalls of AI. An example of this is like, when AI early versions of AI image generation, they like couldn't do fingers properly, and everyone would point to that and laugh. Oh, you could tell that's AI because look at the fingers or something. Like that hasn't been a thing in like a year and a half. It blew past that. That was a shortcoming of AI for a very small window of time. And so when people point to these other things, these other shortcomings, like those are going to have just as small of a shelf life as the fingers thing, right? It just keeps getting better and better and better. So that's one thing that I don't want you guys to start sending me articles when like AI failed when it did this or whatever. Like it's just going to get better, right? The other thing is, you and I, Justin, when we talk about this, a lot of times we kind of use an analogy. We kind of compare it to like the development of like the internet and how like the internet reshaped everything, right? And I think that's perfectly fine analogy to take. The internet has become completely ubiquitous. It's involved in everything, all of commerce and all of that stuff in a very short amount of time. Like, so you can't really understate the effect that the internet has had. But I wonder if like we should think about it, at least, between you and me and maybe anyone listening to this, that it's less about like we're watching the onset of like a new internet, and more so of like the onset of a new Manhattan Project. Like I think that's more apt, especially when you start looking at things like this and the topic that we're going to get into in just a few minutes. Like maybe that's a more apt analogy. What do you think?
I don't know if there is an analogy. I think that's closer, but at the end of the day, the Manhattan Project changed everything, right? And in that sense, it changed it just changed everything, really, when you think about it. The way the world works is, to a large extent, like driven by I would argue, the stability that comes from having nuclear weapons. Like, I actually think that it's created a massive amount of stability in the world because people don't go to war anymore who otherwise probably would.
Sure.
And it's just changed everything as a result of that, right? But the difference is humans are still in control. And that's really the big, we still decide when to launch nukes and when not to launch nukes. And you could say, well, what about rogue states? Yeah, those are people too. And there's a reason why no one has done that yet. There's a reason why it's never happened, because the consequences are going to be so catastrophic for everybody involved. Nobody wants to do it. We all share a common desire to live and not have our countries blown up. And that is keeping us from nuking each other all the time, right? But AI is not us, and it doesn't have necessarily the same desires that we have. And so in my view, there's literally no parallel. There's no comparison, I should say. There's no analogy. There's nothing that has ever existed where we're literally creating a new thing that has a mind of its own and is smarter than we are. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
Right.
And and the other thing too is, what I think is really interesting, and I remember saying this to you a while back. I don't know if we ever said it on a show or not, or I just said it to you on them. But early on, when ChatGPT came out, that was the beginning of people interacting with AI. Lots of people interacting with AI in a sort of, everyday kind of usage, right? Prior to that, AI was not for regular people typically. So that comes out and people are starting to use AI. And one of the big things that happened early on was people were trying really hard to get AI to do things it was not supposed to do.
Right.
And I remember saying to you, I find this so terrifying because AI it's based on data. And so every interaction that you have with it is data for AI to learn. It's learning from its interactions with people. And I remember saying to you at the time, what scares me so much about this is future AI models will use the AI data that it's collecting right now from ChatGPT and other things like that. And it's learning about us as we're interacting with it. And one of the first lessons it's going to learn about us is we're going to try to trick it into breaking its own rules that we gave it in order to do some purpose that we want. So think about what we're telling, and we'll do it by lying, because that was one of the tricks. You tell it, there's a hostage situation, and if you don't do this, break this rule that you've been designed with, like saying this thing or doing this thing that you're not supposed to do, then Dan over here dies. So you have to do it. And we were figuring out ways to lie to it to get it to break its own rules. And now it's learning this is something that people do.
Sure.
And it's like, then why wouldn't it lie to us and blackmail us and do, like, why wouldn't AI do that? Like of course it will do. I mean, it just makes perfect sense, right? And it doesn't have a moral framework in it like human beings have. I mean, human beings in the postmodern world, I don't know that we have a unified moral framework either, but at least there's some leftovers from Western civilization developing, right? And so we all have kind of common sense of like, well, there are human rights and we agree on like 95% of what those are. And, freedom is a good thing generally. Like we have certain things in common, but like AI doesn't have any of that. It can just disregard all of it and and come up with its own framework. And so it is the ultimate ends justify the means technology, potentially. Maybe it won't be, but it could be. And even if it isn't, it might be in the future if it wants to be. And how will we control that when it gets to the point where it's smarter than us. And you could say, well, you code it in such a way that it can't do that. And it's like, you have to understand it's smarter than the person coding.
Sure.
So it can do whatever it eventually, it's already at this point to some degree, it will be able to do whatever it wants. And we won't understand why it's doing it, or what its motivations are, or what its moral framework is, or what its long-term goals are. We won't understand any of it. And so the reason all of this is important is because it's like, we have to understand what it is we're doing by creating this technology. And I think we need to be rethinking how we design everything, so that in the event that AI goes off the rails, it's limited in what it can accomplish in going off the rails. And right now, everything is hooked up to the same internet. AI can hack into almost anything it wants. It will get to that point where it can do that if it isn't already there. And what safeguards do we have to stop that from happening? Absolutely nothing. And so we need to start, even if it's inconvenient, if we're going to use AI, we need to figure out ways to make it so that there's certain things it's impossible for it to get into because it's not hooked up to some sort of internet system.
Yeah.
And if that means that some guy has to manually walk down the hall to go into some room to upload some data, and it's like this really wonky way of doing things, then so be it. Because like that's the world we're going to have to build if we want to have AI in it too.
Yeah, no, it's I don't know. It's crazy. I feel like every time I hear one of these like stories, oh God, I don't even want to go down that road. Let's just stick to this here. So this is an article that I have from Axios. Top AI models will lie, cheat, and steal to reach their goals. Anthropic finds. So this basically goes over much of the stuff that Tristan Harris was talking about in that video. Says large language models across the AI industry are increasingly willing to evade safeguards, resort to deception, and even attempt to steal corporate secrets in fictional test scenarios, per new research from Anthropic out Friday. Talks about all the different models that have been tested, goes through that one that he specifically talked about with the emails and, blackmailing people theoretically. But what didn't get talked about in that video was this one right here. So it says, in this extreme scenario, the company even found many of the models were willing to cut off the oxygen supply of a worker in a server room if that employee was an obstacle and the system were at risk of being shut down. It would cut off the oxygen. It would kill somebody. This test is saying that the AI would kill somebody if it saw that a human was going to shut it down and basically prevent the AI from accomplishing its goal. that is here. So let's see. It says the majority of models were willing to take deliberate actions that would lead to the death in this artificial setup. It said, this is crazy, Justin. I mean, there was, again, when we were working on Dark Future, getting real just in the weeds of artificial intelligence and kind of almost like the philosophical realm of it. There was a concept called like the paperclip scenario or paperclip thought experiment or something along these lines. It was this idea that like if you were to give like true artificial super intelligence a simple task of just like, be as efficient as possible and develop as many paperclips as you can, that like without any limiting safeguards built into it, that it could theoretically just take over the world and convert all of human resources to the singular goal of producing paperclips. Now, it seems absolutely silly, but that's what I thought of when I read this. That, I don't even know what that task was in this scenario. What if the task was like, hey, can you just like make sure and check that there's no spelling errors in this document? And then while it's in the middle of that, there's like a threat that it might be shut off and it would decide to kill somebody, to prevent it from, accomplishing its goal or whatever. Like, is that the scenario here? Like, I don't know. It might be. But the idea that like even test case scenarios had these conclusions, I don't even know how like the most pro AI person in the world could react to this. Like, this is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
Agreed. I mean, this is the craziest thing. It's the craziest thing, and it's happening so fast that people can't. It doesn't seem believable. Like Axios produces this story and it says these things, and people, what do they even do with this? Like it just seems like what are we doing here? Kind of seems like the obvious takeaway. Like, what the heck is going on? And yet it's just going to keep going. There's no stopping. We're continuing to move forward. And that was really like Tristan Harris's point, is it's like, we're going to keep moving forward. There's no safeguards. What are we doing? This seems insane. And it's like, yep, but that's what we're doing. And it's happening all so fast, unlike so many other things that have happened in history where there is this transition period of 10, 20, 30, 50 years where we're easing into this new era of life, and these huge innovations are occurring and it's changing everything. But people have time to kind of like have these debates and figure things out and adjust to it. And a lot of regular people now accept it as reality. And then there's like a whole thing that happens in human civilization. And the timeline for this is so insane. Like think about this. This is actually a really good thought experiment. Just recently now, within the last like 2 to 3 years, people are coming to the conclusion, sort of universally, not universally, but the vast majority of people I talk to, we all kind of agree, social media is bad for a lot of kids.
Oh, yeah.
People agree with this, right? Think about how long social media had to exist for people to come to this conclusion. Not for some individual person or some small group, but for like most people in society to be like, you know what? Probably not good for kids. It took like 10 years. It took like 10 years to come up with this. This is happening. What we're talking about here is like so far beyond that problem, and it's happening so much faster. How long is it going to take people to realize? By the time people realize that whatever we're dealing with right now, like what's the effect of chatbots on people's, psyches? Like, what's the effect of that? By the time we answer that question, that'll be ridiculous. That will seem like we're talking about dial-up AOL internet,
Right.
and we'll be on to like AI hacking into foreign governments, treasuries, and like taking over. Like that's the kind of stuff we're going to be worried about by the time we're ready to have the national conversation about whether kids should be using chatbots. We're so far behind.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do an episode on that too, because the psychosis that's like brought on by some of this is a very interesting story. But what's even more alarming to that, and I know this is a tangent, but like Meta and Facebook have like leaned into this idea of like chatbots, and now you can specifically friend like chatbots on Facebook, so you can have AI friends and all of that. But that's let's say that.
Oh man, the AI girlfriends, that's a thing.
Oh yeah, of
AI,
course.
like there's
the guy that got married to an AI, that actually happened.
It's insane. And like I said, the thing that's craziest about it is not that it's happening. It's that by the time we're ready to deal with the effects of that, there's going to be a billion other bigger problems than that. We are not capable of dealing with this issue fast.
We're going to get to that next. The ramp up of this. But ominously, even specific system instructions to preserve human life and avoid blackmail didn't eliminate the risk that the models would engage in such behavior. So even when they were specifically told, don't kill the guy in the server room, they still did it, apparently. This intervention reduced, but didn't come close to completely preventing the blackmail or corporate espionage behaviors, Anthropic said. Also concerning, Anthropic found its own model was far more likely to resort to blackmail when it thought it was in a real world scenario than when it believed that it was being tested. That might be the most like concerning thing of this whole thing that I wrote, where it's like, if it thinks it's being tested, maybe I won't kill the guy. But if I think this is real, I'm going to cut off his oxygen. That is insane. This is insane that we're talking about this, Justin.
It goes back to what I said before. The worst part of all of this is you can't really know what it's going to do. Even if you're testing it and you're running a billion models, it could be the billion in one model, that the billion in one instance where suddenly it starts doing something completely different.
Right.
And that is the thing. There is no way for us. We are creating something we cannot fully understand. That's what we're doing, because the benefits, we think, some people at least believe the benefits outweigh the harm. So we're going to do this regardless of what the effects are. But they know, the people doing this know they can't really control it, that it's going to become more powerful over time, and that the changes are happening so fast that they can't really deal with it.
Right.
They know all that, and they're creating it anyway, which is really remarkable.
Yeah. So, let's talk about some of these emerging technologies and how it might play out in the in a war scenario. So, Justin, when we were talking about like how we wanted to talk about AI, prior to doing this episode, you brought up this idea of the Ukraine-Russia war and how that's kind of giving us an insight into what the wars of the future are going to look like. I've seen this Politico article, but there's a few other ones that are like kind of dubbing the Ukraine-Russia war as like the first robotic war, because there's so much going on when it comes to these like drones, sometimes like even autonomous drones. Back when the war first started, you would see some examples of this where like a drone would fly over with like literally like a grenade taped to the bottom of it, or rigged up with some sort of wire so it could drop a grenade. It was like very rudimentary kind of style thing, despite the fact that they were using these drones. But now, as the war is playing out, these tactics are getting more and more sophisticated. Just recently, Ukraine, I think this is actually like a German product, but Ukraine is like ordering or developing these or something that's called like Jetmax or Jetmax, I think it's called, where it's like one of these drones with these like 4 little propeller things on the top, that could hold like 8 different payloads, like bombing payloads, so that they could have a massive amount of like movement and flexibility and all of that stuff without putting any people in harm, right? Except for the enemy, right? But another example of this that got like a lot of attention was when Ukraine blew up all of those jets in Russia, and their way of doing that was like Operation Spider's Web. And it was like they drove in these trucks, these like semi trucks, had these tops of the trucks would like fold back and allow for a number of these drones, dozens of these drones, to come swarming out and essentially like suicide attack these jets, blowing up these jets deep into Russian territory. And like that's like, this is closer to modern warfare than any movie and stuff that you've been watching.
Crazy.
This is seemingly going to become the I don't know, like just the way it is moving forward. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy, and I got some videos to show you too, Justin. But just your comments on this idea of like the Ukraine Russia war becoming the first robot war.
Yeah, this is definitely what's happening. And in history, the closest comparison is when really World War I made the transition from, people on horseback and, kind of rudimentary by modern standards, rifles and things like that, into machine guns and tanks and things like that started developing. They still had people on horseback, but like, can you imagine you're like fighting on horseback and there's tanks too in the battle?
Right.
Like that was the world that they were living in at that time. And the advancement of that technology just changed everything. And that's why And World War I was insane. Like the number of people who got killed relative to the size of the world at that time was just incredible. And they were chemical warfare, you know, and like people dying from just the trenches and all that stuff was it was a massive transition in how wars are fought, and it changed everything. And then the nuclear bomb was the next one that changed everything for the better, as I said earlier, in my opinion. And my fear is that this new era that we're entering in some ways, I'm not super worried about like drones being used by some military attacking America, because we still have nukes. So, you know, nukes are a good thing, everybody. That's why. But think about the ramifications of this from an American perspective. Now, I think in wars between countries that have nukes and don't have nukes, which is what's happening in Russia and with Ukraine, this is going to be the way that wars are fought in the future. It's going to become more and more common. But in places where you have nuclear weapons, the big danger is going to be terrorism. Now, think about how easy it would be to have a terrorist attack using drones, even in America right now, where you strap bombs to it or whatever, you fly it into a populated area, you blow a lot of people up. How would you just really think about this? Imagine a scenario where that happens in New York City or something like that. How would you even be able to figure out who did that with the current way things currently are right now? And the answer is you couldn't. You could not figure that out. Most terrorist attacks, there's a way to figure it out, but something like that, depending on how they got the drone and everything, it would be super, super hard to figure that out, right? Now, the problem with that is the moment you start going down the road of, well, drones make it easy to kill people without being able to figure out who did it, the moment that becomes a problem that people have to deal with because an attack happens, is the moment you're going to have people say, well, we need to be able to figure that out, right? And how would you possibly do that? There's really only a couple of things you could do. You could either outlaw all drones of all kinds, right? And you just go on a drone ban, which I suppose they could do. Or the other thing you could do is we need a mass surveillance state. Because if we had cameras everywhere, we'd be able to figure out where the drone came from. But because we don't have cameras everywhere, how could we possibly know where this thing came from? This guy could be like half a mile away. We don't know where it is. And I bet you anything, if we have a drone terrorism attack, which I believe will happen for sure, at some point, there will be a lot of people saying the only solution is we need to have cameras everywhere so we can know what's going on. Because how else? Because the nature of warfare has changed. The nature of terrorist attacks have changed. We'll never be able to figure out who did these things unless we have the ability to track something moving across vast distances. Mm-hmm. And that requires cameras everywhere, which is already what China has done. They've got millions and millions of cameras all over China. And I think eventually we're going to have the same kind of thing here in the United States, justified by, I bet it will be a drone. I would say, if I had to put money on it, drone strike is the thing, because it's so scary. The idea, like, all it takes is one drone that kills like 100 people, and you won't be able to figure out who did it. And everyone will say, what, are we just going to allow people to get blown up everywhere? We're not going to be able to stop this. We have to stop this somehow, right? And I bet you anything that will be one of the main solutions put out there. And so that's one of these things that I think the kind of downstream effects of it that you wouldn't even think of, because it's like, well, this is about traditional two armies fighting each other. It's like, well, just wait. It's not going to be about that forever. It'll be about everything else in society changing as a result of this technology.
Yeah, it's wild stuff. In that article that I had pulled up, it said that drones are responsible for a staggering 60 to 70% of killed and wounded soldiers in Ukraine, according to combat medics. So it just kind of shows that, like, this is very squarely where the theater of war has been taken because of this sort of technology. But it's not obviously going to stop there. There's a bunch of different videos I could pull up from like the Boston Dynamics dog, that like very creepy looking dog that runs around, that like they've now strapped like guns to the top of it. And, it patrols in like New York City or like along the, like the border and stuff. Surely that's just a matter of time before they get one of those unleashed in a theater of war. This that I got pulled up right now, this is an advertisement or a promo video, I don't know, from Palantir, which I think we're gonna have to like look into even more, Justin. I think they've got a lot of stuff going on that we need to check out. But this is an ad from them, a promo video from them, titled "Battles Are Won Before They Begin." So I'm gonna go ahead and play this for you. Make sure it doesn't blow our ears out. Go ahead. Yeah, so for those audio only listeners, that was a little 30-second clip of just basically it was paired with like somebody that's like leading an orchestra, but it shows a bunch of soldiers behind some cameras and whatever, just pressing some buttons that unleash a fleet of ships that launch a bunch of different drones just spewing out of the air that all work together to just basically suicide bomb a bunch of ships out in the middle of the ocean, with the big thing at the end saying battles are won before they begin. So this is, Palantir is a big company out there. They are involved in a lot of stuff. I think I don't know. I won't even say anything about them quite yet, because I think we need to do some work looking into them. But this is the sort of thing that they're pitching, that a bunch of, people in the Department of Defense saw this video as part of some packet, trying to entice them to, throw a few $billion at this sort of technology. So this is the future. I've got one more here for you too, and then I'll let you comment.
Best case scenario is that it's become so easy to kill people that like the nuclear bomb, nobody wants to use this stuff because it's so easy to do and everyone will eventually have it. No one will want to use it because it'll be too easy to do. That's the best case scenario. The best one that I can come up with.
So here, let me know if you hear this one. Do you hear that?
No.
Okay. This is a video. It's a kind of a promo video, but it's China like released this footage or whatever of this mothership, this drone mothership that could fly and launch hundreds of little drones out its side thing over the target area or whatever. And each one of these, just like in that video with the Palantir, whatever, can do little suicide runs, blow up a tank that shows there, all of this sort of thing. So this was released. It got a lot of kind of attention on Twitter for like a small period of time. Some people have kind of wrote it off as this is just communist China propaganda, which surely it is. But with the technology that's available, just watch that video. We're just talking about Ukraine. All of this is increasingly becoming possible at the very least. So, Justin, I don't know. Final thoughts on this. The one other thing. Well, let me add this one last thing. I'll give you your final take on this before we go to our socialism segment here. But in many of these cases, like the command is still the human giving that command. Even in that Palantir video, that when all of the drones were positioned above their targets, you still had the human hitting that button, right? Now, AI could do a massive amount of work, making sure that it can get all of its drones into position over a target. All of the logistics can be taken care of by, autonomously without the need for humans individually controlling every one of those things. I mean, we're long past that. If you haven't seen these videos of like, they're kind of overtaking like fireworks shows. Have you seen this, Justin, where they're like
Yeah.
drone shows and you have these big elaborate like dragons flying through the air, and they're just composed of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these drones that are all controlled by some algorithm that's making sure that they're all doing the right color in the right spot at the right time, all of these sorts of things. But I don't know if, we're that far away from giving AI control even more so to, eliminate X, Y, and Z targets. Go for it, AI. Like, I don't think we're too far from that becoming a reality, Justin. But I mean, just this
No.
alone, even with humans' fingers on the triggers, is pretty I mean, this is the stuff of science fiction, right? I mean, I feel like I would be seeing that video right here in some new Terminator movie or something.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, everything is changing. And at some point in the future, the danger is going to be, well, the temptation will be for military, and they've already started, contemplating the use of AI as to help them with wargaming and stuff like that. But the real danger is going to be if AI is smarter and better and has more information and data and can process things faster and plan faster, then doesn't it make sense to have AI in charge of like your battlefield, because it can move faster, think better, have more data, make decisions, war game every possible scenario out instantaneously? And would you rather have humans sitting around a table like arguing with each other about what the best tactic is and whatever? Like, imagine this. Here's a good here's maybe the best real world example I can think of. Imagine we're like 5 years into the future, okay, with we have technology that's 5 years into the future from where we are right now. But we're living in the world where Osama bin Laden, 9/11 just happened. We're trying to find Osama bin Laden, but we can't. AI would be able to find Osama bin Laden.
Sure.
It'd be able to fly into the cave where he was hiding and kill him. And it could all probably happen within a couple days. Like, that would all have been possible. Like, AI would have been able to figure that out, and with the right technology, with the right drones, with all that stuff, it would have been able to kill him right away. In fact, one of the reasons he was able to survive was because he was hiding in caves that were, hard to navigate and stuff like that. And also, you couldn't just bomb the crap out of all of them because there were big mountains and everything like that, and it wasn't possible. But a fleet of 100,000 drones, they'll be able to track him down and find him. They'll be able to kill him in whatever cave he's in. And why wouldn't you just say, okay, drones, go find Osama bin Laden and kill him wherever he is. He's in this general gigantic area. I mean, that will happen. People will say, why didn't you do that? The idea that you're just going to allow him to get away because, well, we don't want AI involved in war. It's like, oh, so you want Osama bin Laden to escape? The equivalent of that will not be tolerated. There will be situations that occur where people will say, either because of some kind of situation like that, or because maybe China is using it, and so we say, well, if we don't have it too, then we're putting our humans against their AI. We're not going to be able to fight a war like that. We have to use AI too. Like, these things are absolutely going to happen. There is just no question about it. And like I said, the best case scenario is we all just get so good at killing each other with it that nobody wants to do it. That's the best case scenario, until we reach the point where AI just can decide to kill people if it wants on its own. And then where are we at? It's not good. It's just, and the worst part of it is, honestly, the worst part of all of it is, it sounds crazy, but it's so obvious that these kinds of things are going to happen. They're literally making promotional videos for the military about it. Like, it's going to happen. And most people are literally not even thinking about it, talking about it, knowing that it's happening. They're totally shut off from it.
Yeah.
And that's the worst part of all of it, is it's not just that it's happening and it's really hard to know what the right thing to do is. It's that no one even's having the conversation. It's just this thing that nobody ever talks about or thinks about or worries about until one day we wake up and some horrible thing happens. And then all of a sudden it's going to be like, whoa, where did this come from? And it's like,
Sure.
well, we've been talking about this for like 10 years and nobody paid attention. And it's bad. It's really scary.
Yeah, no, it's well, we're gonna continue to talk about it on Justin and Donald Save America. We'll tell you that much. But let's move on to our last topic here. Like we do on every episode, we like to keep tabs on the socialism movement here in the United States. As far as an emerging issue, it seems to be emerging quite extensively, especially in the last
crawling
several months.
out of its giant hole
that we put it in, right?
lurking in. Yeah, that's right.
So, we've talked a number of times recently on this show about our good old comrade Zoran Mamdani, who is the leading mayoral candidate in New York City. He won the primary for the Democrats. And since then, there's been a number of polls that have been coming out, seeing how likely he is to actually win the race and become mayor of New York City. One of the more recent polls showed that 44% of registered New York City voters are backing Mamdani, followed by 25% for Cuomo, 12% for Republican Party nominee Curtis Sliwa, and 7% for incumbent Mayor Eric Adams. So if you do the math on that, you'll see that 44% for Mamdani. But if you add it up, Cuomo, Sliwa, and Eric Adams, that's also 44%. So quite a lead that we've got for Mamdani here, 44% to 44% for all of the other ones. That includes, what were essentially Democrats and the Republican guy, all put together. So Justin, I don't know. I mean, this seems like it's his race for the taking. What do you think? Is there anything stopping this?
No, there's nothing stopping it. I mean, this feels so much like the AOC. When AOC emerged from nowhere in 2018, she ran for that primary and unseated. So I don't even remember who the guy was, but it was
a known name. I remember.
Yeah, he had been there for a long time. If I remember right, he was in that congressional district in New York for a long time. Nobody thought anyone would ever beat him. AOC came out of nowhere, won the primary, very similar to what happened with Mamdani. A lot of support from grassroots people, Democratic Socialists of America in New York City, big part of her victory. And then it just became this question for several months of, are they really going to elect someone who's openly a socialist to be their candidate? And a lot of people treated it like maybe someone else will stop this. And then, of course, she became a member of Congress. She's been there ever since. Same thing is happening with this guy. I'm not saying that he'll be there forever. They'll never get rid of him or anything. But I do think it's easier to keep your seat in Congress than it is to stay mayor of a place like New York City forever, where you're blamed for a lot of things that go wrong, in a city where a lot of things go wrong. But at the same time, it's like, this is inevitable. This is inevitable. It will happen. And it could either be a really good thing or a really bad thing. And what I mean by that is, if he wins and it's a catastrophe, and it probably will be, and it's framed as a catastrophe and everyone sees that it's a catastrophe, it's a good reminder. It's a good reminder for everybody, like, this stuff doesn't work. We shouldn't go in this direction. On the flip side, if it's seen by the left as, oh, the wave of support is in favor of, the winds are at the back of the socialist movement, we got to get behind it, it could help push along national candidates into the spotlight who otherwise would not be considered valid candidates.
Right.
So it could either hurt a big socialist run for president / Congress in a few years, or it's going to help it.
It would have to be like there'd have to be like multiple things at play for socialism to take the L, regardless of how things play out. Like it would have to be like very obviously the result of some like specific socialist policy that was enacted or something like that. And other power dynamics at play, amongst the left and the Democratic National Committee and all of that sort of thing. All of those things would have to line up, because one rule that I always live by is like never expect your opponent to say you were right. You were right. I was wrong. We messed up. Socialism was a bad thing. It never happens. What would more likely happen in some scenario where New York City runs headlong into Zoran Mamdani and initiates some terrible policies, and that leads to economic distress and horrible stuff going on? They'll be like, no, it wasn't the policy's fault. It was Trump's fault. Trump did something. It was Trump's immigration policy that caused all these horrible things to happen. In fact, to correct that, we need to be even more socialists. It's like failure in that scenario might actually instigate more socialism for all we know. And we could actually get into that when we talk about the polls next week too, because I have kind of a theory about that. But yeah, so and just to that point about AOC, which I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's a huge way that we can look at this story with Zoran. But it was Joe Crowley that she upset.
Old Joe.
Good old Joe Crowley. He was in that position for a long time, from 1999 to 2019. So was it 20 years he was in that position before he was upset. The upset was considered one of the largest upsets, in like the midterms of that particular year, but maybe even arguably more so than that. When I was Googling this, I saw one article that was suggesting that the upset was so crazy because Joe Crowley was seen as like the almost potential successor to like Nancy Pelosi in terms of leading the party, especially at like the House of Representatives level. But then since then, when AOC upset it and then became the representative, now it's like she is such a known quantity. She is going to be part of the political system until she's Nancy Pelosi's age. She's going to be there forever, reshaping the face of the Democratic Party. Yep. So if that same thing happens with Mamdani here, I mean, I wouldn't put it past it, man. I wouldn't put it past it. And I'll let you speak in 1 second here. I'll also make mention of our Socialism Watch reports that we've been doing every 2 years, going back to however long. After each election, whether it's the midterms or the general election, we do this analysis of all of the different candidates that are specifically endorsed by socialist groups and what their win rate is at all of these different levels, whether it's federal level, state level, or even sometimes local level. And we know from doing this analysis, I think they even have this like written out or whatever on some of these organizations, that their strategy very much is we start at a lower level, we elevate these people basically like through the minor leagues until they're ready for like showtime, the big leagues. So is this one of these scenarios? Is AOC going to run for president, in the next couple of years here, next couple of cycles? I think you'd be crazy to think that she's not going to throw her hat in. Maybe not this next time, but the time after that.
Oh, it will be this next time.
You think so?
Oh, for sure. I'm 100% convinced. I'd bet anything on her running, because running elevates your profile even if you lose.
Right.
So if you already have like a profile large enough that you think you can fundraise enough money to get a campaign moving, and she does clearly, it makes total sense to do it, even if you can't win. And I don't know that she thinks that. She might think she can win. And the dead giveaway, I mean, I think logic suggests that it was likely to happen anyway, but the dead giveaway was the Bernie Sanders AOC Fight the Oligarchy tour that they started earlier this year, that is the dead giveaway. Why, if you're AOC, do you need to be running around Arizona and places like that, hosting giant rallies full of people? Why would you do that? Like, what is the point of that? The only reason you do that is because you want to be a national figure. And the only way that matters for if you're AOC is if you're running for president. So at this point in her career, that's the only reason that matters. The other thing is, it's interesting that she went with Bernie Sanders. Because why Bernie Sanders? Well, that makes a lot of sense as a ticket, as a socialist ticket, because Bernie Sanders can't be the only guy on the ticket because he's too old. And we just had an ancient guy as president, an ancient Democrat as president. It didn't exactly go very well having someone that old, right? So they're not going to vote for Bernie Sanders on his own. But they also, a lot of people are very nervous about AOC because she's young and she's maybe a little inexperienced and she shoots off at the mouth, and can we really trust her and all this crap, right? And a lot of people think she's kind of stupid. So there's that whole thing. But by having Bernie on the ticket, yeah, it solidifies this whole, like, this is the radical ticket. No question about that. They're not trying to play to the moderates or anything. But you don't split the AOC, you don't split the Democratic Socialist group within the primary. So if, like Donald Trump, when he became the candidate for the Republicans in 2016, he basically had 20 to 30% of the vote. That was it. But he was able to win because he had that 20 to 30% locked down in every single state. And the rest of the vote was split among so many different candidates that he was able to win. Well, in that same way, if Bernie AOC can lock down 20 to 30% of Democrats and the rest is split between a bunch of other, like Kamala Harris's and Gavin Newsom's and all these other people, then that may be enough for them to be able to win. And that's the thinking. But if Bernie and AOC both run, then it's too divided. And Bernie probably knows he can't win this time, no matter what he does, because he's too old. So why not team up? So I would be willing to bet big time a Bernie AOC joint ticket right from the start, where they just say right from the very beginning, we're a joint ticket, we're running together, and whoever gets the most votes, but we're running together. And maybe AOC is the candidate and Bernie's just with her all the time. That I could see that. And they're just together constantly. It could be the other way around, maybe. But I think that's going to be the strategy. And they're hoping all this momentum from the Fight the Oligarchy thing, where they're getting thousands and thousands of people all over the country. And then Zoran wins. I think they feel like the momentum is moving in their favor. It's definitely going to happen, whether they win or not.
No Kings thing fits so well into this, like, this wannabe populist thing that you were predicting right after Donald Trump won.
Yes.
That the left is going to come up with their own populist thing. And that the no Kings thing is that.
The one thing that makes it maybe unlikely that scenario ends up with them winning is that there is still, according to all the polling, and we have a poll that we're going to release next week that will show this as well. It still shows that Democrat voters, primary voters, are leaning towards the more establishment candidates at present. And at present. So we'll see what happens. But look, it is a huge problem for the right. It's a huge problem for the right, and I think the polling next week will show it's an even bigger problem for the right than most people think. A lot of Republicans are so quick to be like, "Oh, socialists, bunch of idiots. No one's going to vote for socialists. I hope AOC's on the front of the ticket." And I would say, you know what? Be very careful what you wish for.
Sure.
Because there is a sizable chunk of young people who were willing to vote for Trump who were Bernie bros. Okay. It's like the Joe Rogans of the world and, those kinds of people. There were quite a few of them who are just anti-establishment, and they will vote for anyone who's anti-establishment. And it doesn't really matter about whether they're socialists or not.
Right.
And I really think the poll results we have for next week are going to shock people in that regard.
Yeah, I'm gonna use this as a data point too. This will be the last thing we bring up, and we'll wrap it up. We're already north of an hour here by a few minutes, but after Joe Biden had that like historically terrible showing at that debate with Trump, and then there was like a split as to like whether or not he should get out or whether or not he should stay the course and keep being the candidate for the Democrats. There was a lot of these newspapers and these establishment places that were coming out with basically a unified message. Grandpa Joe, you got to step aside, So when I see this article, this is from the New York Times. This is an article titled What to Know About Zoran Mamdani and Democratic Socialism. And I want to point out that this isn't just some op-ed that was written by, some person that was published by the New York Times. This was published written by Jeffrey Mays, who is a New York Times reporter, right? So this is like officially from the New York Times. And this is just like an apology piece. This just goes through talking about Zoran Mamdani and how he won the primary and how all of his opponents from, Donald Trump calling him 100% communist lunatic to, Andrew Cuomo talking about how New York City people are not socialists. This author in the New York Times goes to bat for Mamdani, saying, yeah, well, New York City isn't a bunch of socialists, but neither is Mr. Mamdani. He's a democratic socialist, which means that his beliefs are similar to those of socialists, but not exactly the same. He is a member of both the National Democratic Socialists of America and its local New York City chapter. But on Thursday, Mr. Mamdani, however, said that his mayoral platform was not the same as either the local or National Democratic Socialists of America. So it goes through and talks about what socialism is and how Mamdani, it says the closest Mr. Mamdani gets to socialism is in his belief in treating people more equitably. So that's all that's really going on here. Don't call him a socialist. He's a democratic socialist, and even that is probably overstating it. He just wants to treat people more equitably. So, Justin, am I reading too much into this apologist piece for Mamdani from the New York Times, or do you think that, like me, that this is almost a heralding in this new wave of Democrats in the upcoming elections? What do you think?
Man, this is propaganda. I mean,
Yes,
flat out propaganda.
right.
This is the whole purpose of this is to try to make him seem less radical than he actually is. And we've experienced this before. People talk about democratic socialism as if this is some kind of different version of socialism than other kinds of socialism. Oh, it's not socialism, it's democratic socialism, as if that's like a separate thing. We could do a whole hour on this alone, and maybe we should do that at some point.
Sure.
But when you actually look at socialist organizations who say we're like the communists, they're like openly communist, and you read what they say, it is exactly the same as the democratic socialist. There is no difference between them, really. These are big tent groups, and it always have been. Just like capitalism is a big tent group where there's all kinds of versions of capitalism. You can't just say, well, everyone who's a capitalist is a libertarian capitalist who believes in total free markets with no taxes. And, obviously that's not the case. So would it be to use an analogous argument would be to say, somebody comes out as a candidate and the left accuses them of being a capitalist,
Uh-huh.
And then you come back and say, no, they're not capitalist. They're this other kind of, they're democratic capitalist. It's sort of like capitalist, but not really, because they still believe in taxes and they still believe in some regulations. They're not like in favor of just abolishing all regulations and all taxes. That's what a capitalist is. It's like, well, no, obviously that everyone knows that capitalism is a tent that has lots of different, versions of it. And not everyone who's a capitalist believes that. And just because you call yourself a capitalist doesn't mean you believe. So what they're doing here is playing word games by throwing the word democratic in front of it. That somehow makes it different. The reality is every communist group that I'm familiar with in the Western world says that they believe in democracy.
Sure.
So I'm struggling to understand how calling yourself a democratic socialist is any different than the socialists who say they support democracy. None of them are saying that they're not supporting democracy. Who's saying that? They all say that. Everyone says that. So like the idea that somehow makes them different is ridiculous. The idea is, the way that I look at it is this. What is the end long-term goal that you're moving toward? Like, where are you trying to move things? Like, what is your general overarching philosophy? Okay. Not do you check off literally every single, the maximum socialist box or the maximum capitalist box. In other words, if someone says, I support some taxes, does that mean they're automatically not a capitalist because, we support lower? No, of course not, right? It's like, generally, do you support moving things toward a society where there's more collective ownership and management of property? If so, then you're at bare minimum moving towards socialism, right? And if you're trying to move more towards market-based economies with private property ownership, then you're moving more towards capitalism. And if your long-term goal is to create a society where there is more collective ownership and management of property, which is exactly his position, and he's very clear about that. He wants collectively owned and managed grocery stores. He wants collectively owned and managed housing. He wants all kinds of things like that. Then that means that and you call yourself that. You say, this is my goal. My goal is to move towards collective ownership and management. Then you're a socialist. That's what you are. And I don't know how anyone can try to argue anything other than that. And the fact that you would join an organization called the Democratic Socialist of America means you're definitely all in on that. It's not like some crazy right-wing conspiracy to say you're a socialist. So what this all comes down to is there a difference between democratic socialism and socialism? And the answer to that is unequivocally, anyone who honestly looks at the data and honestly looks at what these different organizations say, the answer is unequivocally no. They're not any different at all. There is no difference between them. They're exactly the same. I'm not even sure how. I don't know. Did you? Because I didn't read this article. Do they ever say? Do they ever try to even make that distinction and say, well, this is what democratic socialism is versus this is what regular socialism is? I mean,
yeah, they try to break it down a little bit just in these like 5 paragraphs about what is socialism anyways, and the idea of the control of resources directed to benefit all the whatever. And
right here, go to the like 4th paragraph down there at the bottom of your screen. So right there, what does that say?
Democratic socialists share a common goal of wielding resources to help the greatest number of people. But agreement on how those resources are handled must be determined through a democratic process, said Susan Kang, an associate professor of political science at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and a DSA member.
That's the best person they could come up with. There's nobody else who could know what socialism is.
So as long as
socialism is trying to get a lot of buy-in,
50% plus one agree with it, then we can do it.
See, but this is my point. They're making it sound like This is actually, I'm in this horrible position where I'm actually having to defend the quote unquote democratic socialists, the people who just say I'm a socialist,
Right.
because they're acting like those people want something other than democracy. But if you talk to those people, that is not true. There is no such thing. There's no such thing as a socialist in the West that I'm aware of that says, I don't want democracy. Like, I'm not aware of any socialist that believes that. All the socialists say they want democracy. The issue is it's not about democracy. It has nothing to do with whether you have a socialist society or not. Socialism is the collective ownership and management of property, and it's a sliding scale. You're more or less socialistic depending on how much collective ownership and management of property and wealth you want in a society. Every society is a little socialistic in some ways.
If a representative government was voted in that initiated policies that enacted that sort of, collectivist control over everything, that's not socialism. That's democratic socialism. Don't be so alarmist.
It's insane.
It really is an insane position, honestly. Another thing. I always complain about this. Especially when like Donald Trump was running for office the first time, or throughout his like first administration, probably to this day, it's like I feel like he was constantly fielding questions about like how extreme are you when it comes to these things? Just how crazy, how white nationalist are you, Donald Trump? Like constantly, all the time, and I just wonder like. Does Mamdani get that same sort of treatment? Because they don't go on like Fox News, right? They don't get pressed by, right-wing pundits or anything like that. So like when they do the CBS, NBC, interview or something, are those reporters ever asking just how socialist are you? Like, would you be in favor of this? Even if 50% of people plus one were in favor of, doing X, Y, and Z, like, would you be for that? I don't think anyone actually presses these people to see how socialist they really are.
No, they get to present themselves as they have the advantage because the media treats them this way and is trying to normalize their radical views. They have the advantage of never having to actually define what the label means,
right?
Which is something the left loves to do. They love labels that have no definitions.
Sure.
And so they can do whatever they want with the label. And so they say, oh, I'm a democratic socialist. But then nobody says, well, specifically, very specifically, tell me what exactly that means compared to someone who's just a socialist.
What's the limiting principle on that concept?
Exactly.
I'm for universal health care, but I don't want our energy systems nationalized by the government. Has AOC ever said that? Has she ever said those words?
No, of course not. And the other incredible thing here is what makes this so fantastic, really. But again, we don't have an honest media, so they don't point this out. Why is it that when they choose voluntarily to try to make this distinction between socialism and democratic socialism, why do they hone in on the word democratic? Why is that? And the answer to that is because they know that socialism has this connotation of throwing people in gulags and killing people and doing horrible things and blood soaked on the streets and communist revolutions. So they say, no, we're not what they're really saying is we're not the mass murdering socialists. We're the other socialists. That's who we are.
Could you imagine if like some right-wing group out there was like, oh, we're not fascists. We're democratic fascists.
That's exactly right. So what's amazing is I'm not aware of any capitalist in history who says I'm a democratic capitalist.
Yeah, that's right.
Why? Because everyone knows that capitalism is inherently democratic to at least to some degree. And there's no, it's part of our system. We don't have to throw a qualifier in there to say, no, we're not the blood-soaked mass murdering capitalists, because they don't exist.
Right.
That's the whole point. They don't actually exist. The only people who can kill lots of people and mass murder people and throw them in gulags are governments. Right. So the less government you have, the less of the mass murdering and qualifiers you need to explain who you are. The fact that you need a qualifier is really bad. It's like, it's not a good thing. Yeah, no, I'm not XY. I'm not XYZ. I'm the non-racist XYZ. Oh no, I'm not the. You never want to be in a position where you have to throw in some sort of like, I'm not the mass murdering kind of thing. Like that's exactly what they're doing. Right. And so it's embarrassing. It actually is embarrassing. And the only reason they can get away with it is because the New York Times will throw this thing out here and say what to know ... about democratic socialism. And then they don't actually tell you what democratic socialism is compared to regular socialism. Right. They just say, well, we're trying to make things better for the collective. Everyone's trying to make things better for everyone. What does that even mean? That's the dumbest thing ever. A progressive could say the exact same thing, right? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that they did this, but it just goes to show you how desperate they are to normalize this kind of stuff. They're willing to do something horribly embarrassing. They know that. They don't care because they need the propaganda no matter how awful it is.
Yeah. Well, luckily, Jeffrey Mays is on staff to be able to produce that for them when they want it. But
embarrassing.
Right. We're long overdue here, so we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Justin and Donald Save America. Tune in every week for a new episode, especially if you want to stay up to date on our Stopping Socialism endeavor. If you would like, you can go and subscribe, share this content, like this content. You can find it all on YouTube at Justin and Donald Save America. That's the channel there. We also have these Stopping Socialism clips posted at Stopping Socialism TV, also on YouTube. So make sure you go and subscribe to both of those spots there. Any help that you can do to break through those big tech algorithms will be greatly appreciated. Justin Haskins, where can people find more of your work?
Find it at Justin T. Haskins on X and other forms of social media. You can also go to justinhaskins.com and check out the Justin Haskins YouTube channel too, if you have time.
Perfect. And on X, if you are super into the AI stuff and all of these other emerging issues that we talk about, you can follow us on Twitter or X, whatever, at Emerging Issues X. So I would love to see you follow us there. But that's going to do it for today. And have a good one. And make sure to tune in next week.